Hello everyone and welcome to the Hobby Guard. In today's video I will be doing a deep dive into my very own version of the lore, not because I don't believe in canon. In fact, I believe in canon probably more than Games Workshop themselves apparently, and a bunch of other content creators. It's just Warhammer canon is sometimes very elusive in its interpretation, and yes, for sure, there's changes and there's, actively Games Workshop is right now gaslighting us into lying about their own canon that they themselves wrote in the past. But regardless, the thing is, Warhammer is such a big universe with such rich lore that everyone connects with it in different ways. And to this point, I've read more than 100 books about Warhammer lore, and throughout the years that I've been reading it, and I've been a different person through all the time that I've been reading said books, and I've connected to them differently in some ways. I've reread or re-listened to, I guess, if you count audiobooks, to quite a few of them. And the second time over, I was not the same person, and I connected in a different way, and so on. So in today's video, I'm just gonna share with you why I think the Emperor was right. The God Emperor of mankind was right, at least, maybe perhaps not in the execution necessarily, as history proves in the end, but in the intention and his original plan as described in Master of Mankind. And I will again take some poetic liberty here and there, and we will dive very deeply into this topic. I am by no means one of those like heavy lore YouTube channels or anything like that. Again, I'm just sharing with you how I connected to these stories, and I will add a hint of philosophy and maybe spirituality or metaphysics here and there. But before we dive into the topic, here in the background you will be watching an awesome edit called It's Just a Game by Saxon of the Orchard. Yeah. So yeah, I just have that in the background because I don't have any background footage prepared for this video, but this edit is pretty cool, even though unfortunately it's not available in high quality. So yeah, just to give the original creator some credit, go watch their video. And I just have another announcement to make just before we jump into the topic of the video, and it is that today I reached 100 subscribers, and I just want to thank everyone who has had faith, because actually you need faith, brother, to subscribe to a channel that is so young, so bare bones as this one is. Not because I don't put effort into it. I've produced, I think, over 70 videos at this point, if not likely more, in just over a few months, and it's not been easy, what with all the family tragedies and stuff that has been going on in my personal life. I've shared some of it, and just being an adult and responsibilities. But it was very refreshing to see that subscriber count go up. I don't expect like any of these videos to go viral because I don't do a lot of dopamine traps in my videos. I don't overproduce them or anything. I don't have the time and I don't have the interest. If people like to listen to the ideas, then that's cool. I do have a lot of cool intentions and plans to make the channel a lot more entertaining. It's just I've had a lot of setbacks this year, unfortunately. So thanks for the faith, thanks for the trust, thanks for joining in on this quest, on this battle against boredom to reclaim our joy. And with that being said, let's jump right into the topic of the video. So to understand the Emperor's plan, first we have to understand the rules of the universe of Warhammer as they are explained to us. And basically Warhammer exists, the world of Warhammer, the fiction of Warhammer, it does have some set rules, and one of them is that it exists parallel to this other reality. There might be more out there, or like different levels or dimensions, but reality as we know it in Warhammer exists parallel to this other reality, which is sort of a dark mirror, but of like the material world, but it is not necessarily made out of matter. It is called the warp, and it is made out of ethereal emotions and energies and forces. It's hard to describe, but the thing is, some of these forces become sentient over time, over millennia, and even the concept of time itself is very funny the way it works in the warp, because anything, a concept, an action, a thought, an emotion, all those things can become sentient in the warp. And this concept works very well with certain psychological or metaphysical frameworks pre-established. For example, as I was back in the day when I started reading more Warhammer books, I was also reading some Nietzsche and some Carl Jung, specifically his book Ion, which is a terrifying book, very hard to understand, but I'm not saying I understood it, not at all. I'm kind of a dumb guy, to be honest with you, but still, I did like to read through it. And, a lot of the concepts that are explained, and of course, Carl Jung takes inspiration or talks about all these different, more ancient practices, like, and spiritual practices and different cultures. And a recurring theme in his works is the collective unconscious, and so he talks about the ions, and it's basically referencing via scientific means. Like, he's using scientific tools to reference or to, how can I explain this in a way that doesn't sound absolutely crazy? Because Carl Jung does a great job, but he's also very hard to get into. But basically, he's using the tools of psychology to explain that reality, there might be an entire set of rules to reality that we have not taken into account, and that science as it stands is kind of limited to understand it, and that in fact all of our consciousnesses might be interconnected in a way that we don't really know. There's this phrase like, do we have thoughts or do thoughts have us? And so I was in this mental framework as I was reading Warhammer, and so as well as other like ancient Gnostic texts and so on. Again, not that I'm like huge into this stuff as a practitioner or anything, I just find it interesting to just open my mind and make use of my neuroplasticity in that way. So when I started reading about how the warp works, actually at first I only started like watching YouTube videos on it, ironically enough. But when you actually read more about how the warp works, some books explain it more than others, but basically it all goes back to this concept of, I guess, the warp gods, sorry, that's a mouthful, may serve the role of either archons or ions. And those are like very heavy terms with a lot of weight to them, so I don't want to like get super technical about it or dive deep or make a one-by-one comparison of these terms. I'm just ideas, basically. So these forces, they are synergetic with humanity. They need us as much as we need them, and the Emperor realizes these early on. And part of his grand plan, as explained in the book Master of Mankind by Aaron Dembski-Bowden, if I'm not wrong. Some people don't like that book, but I had a good time reading it. I actually read it twice. And he explains as part of his grand plan, spoiler by the way, that his objective was to separate humanity, to liberate humanity from this other dimension that over the years has become warped, has become malevolent, has become evil. And he truly believes in the Promethean spirit of humanity. He believes in the value of human life, of human consciousness, but he wants to separate it to break it from the chains of the quote-unquote gods, because he sees them as what they really are, not quite as gods, but as forces that are made of everything that humanity is made of. If you believe some fan theories about the Emperor himself, the Emperor is kind of, well, again, if you believe certain fan theories, the Emperor might be a kind of god of humanity, like sort of a collective unconscious of humanity, but in a different way, not in the way of chaos, but in the way of order. And there's many fan theories out there, and I won't dive into them today, because today is time for my own theory. And the next edit that we will be watching here is called Warhammer 40k Angels of Death Feed Darktide Let Fury Be Our Voice. It's a music video, but again I'll just have it for the edit from the channel Hidden by Leaves, so feel free to check that out if you want to see the actual edit, as I keep yapping endlessly about my passion here. So I mentioned Prometheus, and Prometheus is or the Promethean fire of humanity, of the soul of humanity, right? And that is a very important icon to talk about when we talk about the Emperor and his plans, because Prometheus, as I understand it, I'm no scholar, obviously, even though I do have a wizard hat, there is that, keep that in mind. So, Prometheus means forethought, and that is, of course, that has a lot to do with the Emperor, but that is not the only comparison between the Emperor and Prometheus. Prometheus has a brother called Epimetheus, whose name means hindsight, and or hindsight, or yeah, basically the opposite of forethought. Sorry, English is not my first language, obviously. And you know, when Prometheus creates creatures out of clay, I believe, I might be tripping because again this is other type of old lore for me now. I think Athena, the goddess of wisdom, gives humanity a soul, because if I remember correctly, Epimetheus forgets to give humanity a soul. So Athena gives them a soul, and he gives them a soul in the shape of a butterfly. Now, a butterfly is a very cool symbol for humanity because it represents transformation, the ability of humanity through wisdom, through knowledge, through the love of wisdom, to transform, to evolve, to grow, to change. And you know, few creatures in nature change and metamorphosize as drastically as a butterfly. Now, there is a philosophical figure that some would consider to be controversial, but again, that I just like, called Nietzsche, the one I mentioned before. And Nietzsche comes to the conclusion that humanity is in fact in the process of transforming, that in the future, he makes a prediction, I believe in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, that humanity in the future will split as a race, and but some of it will become the last man, basically a post-human, an endless consumer, a slave to his instincts, to his base pursuit of hedonism, and he will become a slave. Since he became a slave, since he was not able to master his own instincts and desires and impulses, he becomes a slave himself to a master of humanity, right? To the masters of humanity. But humanity also splits in another way, into the Übermensch, which you might have heard of. And basically what differences the Übermensch from humans is that the Übermensch is able to create his own values, to dictate his own path. He doesn't need religion, he doesn't need philosophy even. He doesn't necessarily mean like all the guidelines, all the checks and balances that our culture and our civilization and our society and our communities are guided by. You know, all the reasons that we don't do bad things because we're afraid of the punishment, be it spiritual punishment or legal punishment or just social punishment. Now, the Übermensch is free from all those things. He dictates his own path, and a lot of people reduce this idea of the Übermensch to all sorts of weird interpretations. But the reality, as I understand it, again, I'm no scholar, even though I do have a wizard hat, the reality is that Nietzsche puts the Übermensch way above our ability to understand, to comprehend what that would even look like, because in the end, he's not necessarily human. He is a step above humanity. there are certainly comparisons between the Emperor and the Übermensch, and I would love to jump into that topic at some point. I don't think he's like necessarily the Übermensch, perhaps, but certainly his pursuits were Übermenschen in nature. I would just have to research that topic and reread a lot of Nietzsche before I jump into that, and I just don't have the time to read Nietzsche because he's very hard to understand, just as much as Carl Jung, to be honest. But anyways, in the book Master of Mankind, spoilers for the book Master of Mankind, the Emperor reveals to his custodian his plan, and honestly, both of the times that I read this book, I sort of tuned out as in this part, so I don't remember exactly to what level of detail the Emperor explains it, because part of my brain just understands like, okay, I am about to read something written by a human that is, in many ways, it has to be poetic, right? Because in many ways we're not supposed to understand it. The custodian, who's like a genetically engineered and also in very esoteric ways engineered through very esoteric and ancient sciences and technologies and methods and rituals even. So we're talking about transhumans, superhumans talking to each other. I'm not supposed to understand it, so like my brain sort of tunes out and tries to grasp the eldritch, the incomprehensible, and that goes beyond words, and that is why I don't exactly remember the exact words, but basically, as I understand it, the Emperor, through this pocket reality of the webway, and the webway is separated from the warp. The Emperor wants to basically safeguard humanity there so that they can once and for all evolve completely separated from the chains, the enslavement of the gods of the warp, of these archons, of these jailers of human consciousness, these energetic parasites, these soul parasites, if you will. Because the Emperor, as a psyker, also wants to give the psykers the chance to evolve. And I have sometimes theorized to myself, because I don't talk to other people about this. It's not a very fun topic at parties to talk about, but anyways, I have thought to myself and theorized to myself that perhaps psykers are indeed the next level of evolution of humanity. Not because they haven't existed always. We have evidence in Warhammer that psykers have existed for all of humanity, but every time there's more and more and more psykers, even to this day, with the horrific tithe of psykers that need to be sacrificed so that the Emperor can remain on the throne alive-ish in whatever state that he is considered to be. He can be considered to be alive at all. So thousands of psykers are sacrificed to him every day, and the number changes, but basically thousands of psykers are sacrificed to him every day. And even with that amount of psykers being completely murked in the name of the Emperor, we are still seeing, specifically after the fall of Cadia and the Cicatrix Maledictum opening up, we see an explosion of more psykers coming up, and that is sort of a tragedy in on itself, because yes, psykers are incredible humans who have access and can interact with this mirror dimension, which is not necessarily always a mirror dimension, but it's sort of hard to explain what the warp actually is. But they have access to the warp, and they can attune themselves to the warp while still being able to exist in the material world and to have all the human virtues and vices. But unfortunately for them, there are predators in the warp, right? They are not the kings of the warp. So what and in fact, they allow, sometimes through excessive use of their warp powers or through communing for too long, and as the White Scars would put it, for delving too deep in the waters of the dark sea that is the warp, they end up attracting these predators and bringing them on to the mortal realm, into the material realm. And so the Emperor, also part of his plan, is not only to seclude humanity in this pocket reality, but also to allow the psyker subrace to, is it a sub-race? I don't know, but the psyker version of humanity to expand, to grow, to mature, to evolve, and humanity as a whole. And there is this beautiful scene where he is showing like the path that the humans would have to follow, like all of humanity, as not all of humanity perhaps, but his followers, the humans that he wants to save, they have to follow a path under the Palace of Terra, the Imperial Palace, where they get to see an amazing depictions of all of humanity's histories from its beginnings to the Great Crusade, basically, so that they can understand and grasp, even if at a subconscious level, the immensity of the task, of the destiny that they have upon their shoulders. A destiny that so far they have not been able to fully grasp. And he's going to give to them as a parting gift. Not parting gift, I don't know if he's planning to go anywhere, but he's going to grant them the ability to, for the first time, exist and flourish? I don't know if that's a word in English, but to blossom as a species separated from the warp. And we can only guess at what that would look like. But what the Emperor does for this, it's basically the greatest gamble ever taken by anyone in the history of mankind and in the universe, where he goes, okay, he understands that he has a very short time window to achieve this, because he has been around for a long time. He saw the birth of Slanesh. In fact, he deemed himself powerless to stop it. And he calculates through foresight that this will be like the one chance that humanity will get to save itself. He also understands that he cannot foresee everything, and in fact he describes this in a very beautiful way to his custodian. He tells him like, okay, see that mountain? That's the future. Where you're standing now is the present. Foresight is saying, okay, I'm gonna get there, but you cannot foresee. Hold on, we have a new video in the background here. This is Warhammer 40k GMV Tribute Faith and Survival by Templar. Alright, this is just a playlist that is just playing on and on. I'm completely powerless to stop it. I am not the Emperor. But anyways, he can foresee sort of where he wants to go, but he cannot foresee everything that's gonna happen while he gets there. He doesn't know which rocks are gonna break. He doesn't know which way the wind is gonna blow and push him. And he basically describes in a very elaborate way all the things that could go wrong while you're trying to chase after that destiny. So the Emperor, he projects to the future to the best of his ability, trying to account for all unintended consequences. No religion, the Imperial Truth just is absolutely atheistic and materialistic. And he just cancels all sort of belief and worship throughout the entire Imperium. And he replaces that because he understands that you have to replace that. So he tries to replace that by giving the people the pride, the belief, the faith in humanity. And he tells them stories of the destiny of humanity. Humanity is destined for the stars. We're gonna go in this great crusade. We are going to seize our purpose as a species. We're gonna reclaim the galaxy, and he does this for two things. The first one, as I already explained, well, he understands that you have to replace faith in the gods with faith in something, and he tries to give them faith in themselves, in their destiny. The other reason that he does this is to starve the chaos gods, the warp entities, the jailers, the archons, to starve them of human worship, because humans worship all sorts of things, but the fact that you the fact that you worship a certain or a specific god does not necessarily, even if you worship with the best intentions, the fact is, in the Warhammer universe, you don't know actually what you're feeding with your thoughts and faith and emotion and worship. And that gets proven over and over and over again, because these warp gods, they often depict themselves as benevolent. They don't just come to people like, I'm an evil demon. Like the warps usually don't manifest, so the gods of the warp don't usually manifest themselves clearly to humans like, hi, I'm Slanish, what's up? It's more like they are like domains and like elemental forces. They do seem to have some sort of conscience, they do seem to be sentient, but demons don't just appear to people. Sometimes they do, but they would have gotten nowhere. They don't only appear to people as like, hey, I'm a demon, I'm evil, you want to join the evil side? You'll grow horns and your body will become deformed and you'll be grotesque and likely in pain for the rest of your miserable existence, and in fact your soul will belong to us once you're done with your material manifestation. It's not always quite like that. They often present themselves as benevolent spirits, benevolent gods, benevolent deities, and that is also part of the tragedy. They offer things, they sell you, they give you what you want to hear, and a lot of people fall for this. So the Emperor is trying to channel all of those things. Unfortunately, this backfires horribly because of another Jungian concept called the shadow. Basically, the shadow is Carl Jung. This is a lot more complex than I have time to get into in this long as the warp video, but basically Carl Jung creates this diagram of the human consciousness, and I know it in Spanish, but I'll try to translate it to English as best as I can. But there is basically the self, and there is the persona. I'm translating that correctly, but there is the shadow, and basically the shadow is everything within you that you are not aware of, everything within you that either you push down because society tells you to, or your own conscience, or whatever, things that you have within you, but you are not like consciously thinking about those things, mind you. And what happens in the shadow, and what he describes in the book Ion, is whatever humanity pushes one way, and he doesn't like necessarily blame humans for this. He relates it to basically the cycles of the universe, and not because not because astronomy, right? Not because Gemini is in Uranus, Gemini is in Uranus. So that means you're gonna be more inclined to this or that, whatever. He does not attribute causality to any of this. Rather, he just says like, okay, we don't know, but the fact that we can see these patterns means that there is something within us that understands that there is a pattern, and it is a pattern beyond our use of words, beyond our use of language and reason, and beyond our use of logos. So he needs to work through these like mandala-like diagrams to understand consciousness, and he realizes that entire spiritual traditions have been doing that for thousands of years, and it is all very trippy and schizo and extremely interesting if you're crazy like me. Word of warning, if you're gonna get into that, you might have some dark nights of the soul. But anyways, everything that you push down into the shadow is gonna come back with a vengeance, because it's gonna remind you that it is all there. And the pendulum, the more you push it one way, the more it's gonna swing the other. And so the Emperor pushes the instinct of humanity, the need of humanity for faith in the supernatural, in the metaphysical, in the spiritual, one way. And he goes, no, don't look that way. Just focus on the future, focus on the destiny of humanity. Look, all these amazing ships, look at all our technology, look at our history, look at everything that we've achieved so far. And only look at that with disdain, like, oh, these primates used to believe in gods and pray to gods. No, we don't need that anymore. We are superior, we are advanced. And he just like pushes the pendulum that way, because he's trying to get that pendulum to basically cross this very little window of opportunity, this once in a billion lifetimes opportunity to actually safeguard humanity and actually allow it to flourish free, as I explained, from the influences of the warp. But he does not manage to do that, and he likely realizes this And this part of the story is still kind of being developed, but he likely realizes how things are going to end. And I don't want to get too much more in the recent lore, even though I find it very interesting, but this video is already way too long and I apologize for it. I'm trying to speed up, but if I talk too fast, as I like to talk, my English just takes a loss and it just gets worse and worse. So I'm doing my best here for you to understand me. I have a horrible accent and I apologize for it, but I am working on it. But anyways, and in his last moments of consciousness, at least it seems like the Emperor realizes we are not gonna make it. So whatever he chooses from then on is almost non-important, because he understands that the pendulum is gonna swing the other way, and tragically, what is humanity's new object of worship and faith? The Emperor himself. He ends up becoming what he tried to avoid. And paradoxically, this not only dooms humanity for all eternity, it also kind of saves them. And again, paradoxically and tragically enough, while he was trying to safeguard humanity in this pocket reality free from all sort of outside influences, he ends up trapping humanity in this endless cycle of worship and vengeance and hatred and disdain and all that paranoia that now habitates the minds of people, of humans, is also what is feeding the malevolent entities of the warp, the chaos gods. And paradoxically enough, once again, that is also what is keeping humanity going, what is keeping humanity safe. So he ends up basically trapping them in a way that he did not at all foresee or intend to. And the most tragic thing of all is that the one thing powering all of this, not only through faith, but also through physical means of guidance through the warp, and also as a barrier against the warp gods and stopping demons from sprouting through the actual, like the literal heart of the Imperium, and just ripping everything to shreds and destroying humanity forever and damning their souls for all eternity. The one thing is the Emperor himself. He sits at the center of this horrible clock of madness that keeps going round and round endlessly, keeping his subjects trapped in a cycle, and he is as much the prisoner as he is accidentally and unfortunately and tragically the jailer of the very own species that he tried to save. Does that make any sense to you? I don't know, it sort of made sense to me, I guess. These are things that I'll think about, but not quite into words, and it's not always in English, and it's very hard to put into words. But now I want to hear your thoughts about it. I want to hear that. Did you understand at all what I was trying to say? Did I explain myself more or less understandably? Have you had any similar thoughts? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Whatever it is, please share it with me in the comments down below. I love to read all your comments, even if they're critiques. Again, even if you disagree. As I always say, I can only learn from your comments, and I have a very thick skin. So with that being said, this video is long enough, so I will now say goodbye. Remember, as usual, ad astra, to the stars, my friends. And the one thing the Emperor never intended to do, and he certainly never did, was female custodies. So remember, as I always say, there are no female custodies.